Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Hypeimmune Reviews, where hype comes to die. I'm Schoolwriter and today we're going to talk about Like a Dragon, Infinity Wealth. My friends and I have a little joke about the Yakuza franchise. Just like the old Star Trek movies, before the dark times, before J.J. Abrams, they have a weird tendency of varying in quality. If they make a good game, the next one will be bad, and then the next one after that will be good again. The kicker is that this trend follows production line, not necessarily number sequel order. So for example, you had a good game in Wii 4, 5 was bad, and 6 was bad as well. But that's because between 5 and 6 there was 0, arguably the best one in the entire franchise. 6 was so bad it was downright hilarious, and after it, 7, the game with the new lead, Ichiban, and one of the best of the franchises as well. Now comes 8, Infinity Wealth. Did it successfully break the curse, or was it a victim of it as well? And if so, why? Let's find out. So, what is it about? Sometime after the events of Like a Dragon, Ichiban Kasuga, the hero of Ijincho, is now taking steps to ensure that ex-Yakuzas will be integrated back into society, and he will try to save as many as he can. Although fate throws a wrench into his plans when he receives news about his mother not only being alive, but actually searching for him, and she is in Hawaii, and pretty much everyone else is also looking for her, including the legendary Yakuza Kiryu Kazuma. Things will get far more complicated when a deep plot is unveiled that may affect all of Japan and Hawaii. Visuals. Graphics wise, there is no surprise here. The Ryuga Gotoku Studios is so far have delivered really good visuals, and this game is no exception. Ichiban and his crew will go through the usual fare of urban locales. Malls, weird dungeons through both Ijincho and Hawaii, beaches. Since this game still uses the Dragon engine that was debuted on 6, most of the scenario can be interacted with. There will be a really good set of light effects and everything is bright and colorful. Hawaii, the newest location, is downright enormous, and even if it's a tourist attraction, it sports several different areas with different flavors. From the more luxurious plazas, more quaint malls, artistic alleys and slums. It's a bit too big, but that's for gameplay. Character design wise, it seems that the dev team has finally been able to lift a slump from abandoning the Yakuza, and are dabbling into more colorful and interesting designs using more mundane clothes and civilians. The new additions to the team, Tomizawa and Chitose, are interesting to analyze style-wise. Chitose's attire, while somewhat bland due to all the black, gives the impression of a ballerina, from which most of her fighting style comes from. But there is a focus on her out of the norm hairstyle. Tomizawa, on the other hand, wears the more common and usual attire, but he is meant to contrast with Ichiban's new set of clothes, purple against red. Antagonists are an interesting case. The majority are monochromatic in attires, but most of the personality in design was transferred to everything else. Pose, behavior, stance, expressions. Yamai is a tall dude with focus on his big shoulders, even if he is slim under his coat, while Mendes barely uses anything besides the usual white high-class attire, but he's full of scars and he is bulkier. Sadly, those two seems to have drained most of the dev team's imagination, because the other antagonists are far blander. Now, the enemy design is mostly lifted from the previous game, split into the Hawaiian enemies and the Japanese enemies. And the Hawaiian side got a bit shafted, the enemies there being more mundane and lackluster. The cutscenes are also good, showing that the visual directing still hasn't lost its chops. They have a good camera control, really good photography from time to time, and knows about pacing, panning, and more dramatic shots. Most of the cutscenes follow a TV drama style where the focus are on the characters and whoever is speaking, so don't expect any huge panoramic shots or anything more elaborated. Needless to say, motion capture for bodies and especially mouths are still top notch during cutscenes with a leeway given outside of them. So I'm not surprised to see that, at least visually, the studio is still at the top of their game and only improving. Gameplay. Like a Dragon, Infinity Wealth is pretty much like its predecessor, a turn-based RPG. Players step into the shoes of Kasuga and explore the city maps through a third-person view. Whenever Kasuga meets with enemies, he initiates combats where he and his team can use a myriad of abilities. There are special characters that may be equipped with a specific job or class from which they will learn skills that may or may not be used regardless of the equipped class, depending on how much said characters are friendly with Kasuga. Thus, the normal gameplay loop surrounds switching classes around, tailoring a specific combo of skills, and going around doing activities with your friends so your bonds may grow stronger and thus more skills may be equipped, while buying or developing new gear. There are several side activities ranging from ye olde darts and cards to delivering food and taking pictures of perverts. Yes, this is still a Yakuza game. If this is your first contact with the franchise, play 7 or 0 instead, and get acquainted with all the weirdness and homoeroticism. Akin to past titles, there are minigames with their own storylines this time too. The Dondoko Island, that is totally not a rip-off Animal Crossing, and the Sujimon League, which is totally not a rip-off of Pokemon, each having their own developed gameplay aspects. If you are one of the 3 people that read my reviews, and thank you very much for that, by now you must have been aware that the Ryuga Gotoku studio likes to hone their skills as they go. If a specific gameplay element was wonky or problematic in a game, in the next one they will be either perfect or ditch it out altogether. And oh boy, they overhauled the entire gameplay here. If 7 was rough around the edges, they did a hell of a job sanding everywhere because literally everything gameplay wise was improved. Combat is slicker, easier to grasp, user interface is better at telling what each attack does, if it breaks enemy guard, if it launches them forward. It's also clearer to see if your attacks will knock enemies like dominoes, and this time everyone can grab trash and items to bash their foes. For those who don't know, grabbing random objects and using them in combat is a staple of the franchise, but in the last game it was limited only to Kasuga and only if he was in a specific job. There are new combination attacks and it basically spoofs Sentai teams, special attacks and a lot more. And I mean it when I say that everything was improved gameplay wise. From bigger changes such as the alleviation of grinding to minor things like the game telling the player when a dungeon or mission that will take a longer time to clear and what level you should be, including gear level. Transition through the map was made easier with the addition of a Segway that you can customize, but you still have to recharge its batteries from time to time and it costs money. And in a huge map such as Hawaii, a Segway is a blessing. Now you don't have to go to a specific cab to use the fast travel, you can just open the map, pay an extra fee and off you go to any specific taxi stand in the game. The first thing that the game does is ask the player which audio language they want, which is really good. Still on the topic of audio, even smaller things were tweaked, such as the addition of a music player. Now you can use nearly anywhere except some dungeons instead of limiting it to the hub bar. There are several songs to collect through the world and minigames, thus giving the player an incentive to at least try them out. User interface got a bit more complex but not overly bad. Some aspects could have been tweaked better, such as listing gear outside of the equipment screen, but overall it's not bad. Friendship mechanics also got tweaked. In the previous game, whenever you reached a threshold in the Friendship Gauge, you'd stop receiving points till you went to the hub area and had a small event with your colleague. Now it just keeps accumulating points regardless of the events, although special bonuses such as techniques that are only unlocked after you talk with your pal. And now there is the Friendship Bingo card. If you find specific spots to trigger specific conversations with your partner, they will tell a facet of their personality, and if you complete a bingo line, you receive a huge bonus in friendship. It helps the player knowing another side of their colleagues and rewards them. The extra dungeons were overhauled too. This time there are two, one in Japan and another in Hawaii, and they were given their own distinctive storylines and given points to be exchanged by prizes. But instead of a series of fights, now there is a randomly generated floor to explore. A randomly generated floor that gave me PSTD shivers from Dead Souls, and yes, I played that game. I personally don't like this sort of random generated dungeon, but its use as a good place to quickly grind and prevent both Japan and Hawaii from getting stale is undeniable. Now, on to the bad side. First and foremost, I know that Sega isn't the brightest cook in the shed. I mean, just look at what they often do with the Sonic franchise. And I don't like, but I can understand adding some extra jobs and some lame costumes for characters as DLC. But paywalling New Game Plus, a basic game mechanic? This reaches EA, Ubisoft and Blizzard levels of stupid greed. It's akin charging for extra save slots. They apologized later and didn't do the same thing in the newest game Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii, but just the mere idea that this was implemented in the first place and not removed after the backlash was enough to give this game a sour mark. Outside of this, while the developers improved the gameplay in leaps and bounds, there were some minor issues that pile up, most from their inexperience in make RPGs, leading to weird balancing issues. For example, it feels like the devs couldn't decide with a weapon progression system and chose nearly all of them. You have a progression a la Dark Souls with upgrades to materials, progression by giving weapons elemental powers, and progression with simple money by buying better weapons. On paper, this seems like a good idea to give players freedom to choose what weapons they use and when. But the lack of balance between money and loot pigeonholed me into a specific choice. After all, what's better? Grind for money and buy a baseball bat that will give Kasuga a better swing? Or grind for money and specific rare materials to give him a bonus that will soon be surpassed anyway. This weapon design scheme affected most of the gameplay as well, and not in a good way. Several minigames were simplified too much, like fishing, where you just press a button at the right time and you can't immediately fish again. You have to stop, talking to the fisherman again and wait. And the prizes in specific side games. They aren't well balanced either, good with interesting mechanics, but wait a single chapter and they will be overshadowed by any other gear. So either you grind through a whole minigame at once as soon as you find it, or never engage with a minigame at all because the reward won't be worth buying in the long run. Speaking of grinding, another problem that I feel is that this game's relationship with money is a bit wonky, as if they wanted the player to grind a bit for specific gear, then step it back and then crank it up the grinding again. While it won't be a big problem, it can become annoying in the start and in the middle till you reach Dondoko Island. From there, the minigame will give Kasuga some hefty rewards that may sustain you through the middle of the game. But from there, things will be so expensive that you'll be worth back into the grinding fights, and you end up overleveled to tackle the game's challenge because you wanted a better pair of boots. What's downright bizarre is that sometimes you may find really rare items, such as job experience boosters, seemingly at random, when they are supposed to be one-of-a-kind rewards after specific questlines. This is more up for each person's tastes, just like the fact that due to the new mechanics, this game got quite easier. For example, this time, if Kasuga and only Kasuga is down and in combat, the battle will be over, but instead of a game over, the enemies just take a chunk of your money, unless it's a critical mission or a boss battle. And I feel that the enemies weren't well adjusted to all the myriad of things that the players can do now. The personality mechanics of the previous game weren't overhauled, but it's insanely easier for Ichiban to reach immensely high levels by simply greeting people on the streets due to the new friendship mechanic. I honestly didn't mind it much, but those expecting something more hardcore or difficult may end up disappointed. So most overall, minor problems that aren't really bad. What annoyed me was that Hawaii's map is really big. Too big even. A hub could have helped immensely since there are only 2 spots where players can change jobs, 1 hub, and several shops of different levels of gear are way too scattered. Lastly, who thought it would be a good idea to let the party be joined by 2 different characters in the penultimate and last chapters of the story respectively? It basically grinds the gameplay up to a halt due to the player suddenly having to stop and pick up the pace, collect friendship spots and raise the level, but that's more up for the writing. Being a series of extremes, the Yakuza franchise has some of the best and the worst writing I've seen in games. I'm not exaggerating. And Infinity Wealth's writing is downright impressive for the completely wrong reasons. For a casual player, this game's story will merely be meh to bad. But to me, who stops to dismantle stories akin to a kid fiddling with a radio, it's downright impressive on how much a clusterfuck of mistakes and problems ended just a mute. I'll try not to be overly harsh, but if my tone sways, it's more because I'm impressed and constantly pondering who thought this would be a good idea, rather than sheer vitriol. This story has problems in every single aspect. I'm not joking or exaggerating. You name it, this aspect has problems here. Characterization, plot, cohesion, coherence, stakes, pacing, everything. If I took a shot of tequila for every basic what not to do in writing point the writers violated, I'd be dead before the 3rd chapter. Honestly, this game tempted me into making one of those essays about problems in writing, dissecting its structure and showing most of the flaws. But for that, I'd need to stop doing everything I'm doing now and focus solely on replaying 7 for a base of comparison and 8 again. And I won't be able to do this unless my hobby starts paying my bills. Who knows, perhaps in the future, on the road if I make a Patreon or something. For now, I'll have to give you all a tidbit of the problems being as concise as I can, and spoilers for at least the first 3 chapters will be inevitable, so brace yourselves. Now, without delays, this game has 14 episodes of different lengths each. Nothing surprising here, and the first half of the first chapter actually does a good job of establishing how Ichiban is a nice guy and his motivations. He wants to help people and will go to any lengths to do so, including but not limited to fall into a filthy river. It's also shown how the heroes of tomorrow are faring. Adachi has his company where he is hired by local shops to test the security by stealing their items, to which he hires an ex-yakuza. Namba got a job, Saeko is now running her cabaret, Zhao and Jugihan are hiding. After that, the episode goes into a lengthy series of scenes that could have been easily turned into a simple conversation, or even better, a simple flashback. But we go on a lengthy, albeit funny, side quest about Ichiban getting ready for a date with Saeko, and he gets some advice from Namba and Adachi. At first it serves to highlight some of the dialogue choice systems that you not see much in the game itself, but then it goes on, and finally we have the date that goes on, and finally leads to a scene where Ichiban fucks up by confessing his feelings, wanting to marry Saeko, spewing a lot of things that are considered misogynistic nowadays. Saeko just gets silent, turns around, says that she isn't bothered, and proceeds to cut communications with Ichiban for a year. Then the plot falls on Ichiban's lap when it's revealed to him that a YouTuber known as Tatara framed him talking to Adachi and his recently hired ex-yakuza about the recent security jobs, as if Ichiban was the ringleader of a new organized crime syndicate, tainting his reputation, getting him and his friends jobless again, and thus sinking the progression they made from the first game. The gang flops their arms, saying we are screwed, nothing to do now. I had to stop the game then to process this tidbit because In a world where there are gigantic gold castles inside castles, casinos over boats and miraculous rubber bullets, this this specific tidbit, instantly shattered my suspension of disbelief. I'm not an expert on Japanese YouTube culture, but I'm aware of general YouTube culture and I know a lot about information wars. If Adachi was hired by these companies as he claims he did, there would be contracts. Not even he is stupid enough to make handshake deals about stealing stuff, I hope. All he would have to do is post those contracts online and sue the Tatara channel, and pretty much like a wounded shark, every single competitor channel would sniff the story and jump from Tatara's throat. They would still be screwed, but they would still be fighting. None of it happens. None of it. Ichiban just pulls all the blame to himself, starts to mope around, and Adachi and Namba are still a bit upset, but surprisingly chill about losing everything they fought for so hard in the previous game. But this means that the theme of this game will be fake news, right? With Ichiban and friends asking for help of Jungi Han and Jiao to track down Tatara, right? Wrong. In fact, they go into the opposite direction, tracking down who is hiring the Yakuzas that Tatara channel rendered jobless. They fight through a whole base of Yakuza only to discover that their assault was useless because the chief of said Yakuza was planning on talking to them anyway. And then we have the true plot being thrown into Ichiban's lap, kickstarting the game proper and then sending Ichiban to Hawaii. I highlight the first chapter because it's perfect to show the problems found in this game, because they will be repeated through the story over and over and over. Characterization? In the previous game, Ichiban was an adorable awkward fish out of the water due to spending 10 years in prison. But he wasn't a gigantic idiot. He was a really good person who saw the best in everyone, but in this game he's turned into a saint who will instantly forgive people who attempted serious, heinous crimes against him for the sake of moving the plot ahead. Saeko is a cabaret owner that knows Ichiban. Her job is to read people, yet the plot conveniently retcons Ichiban's previous experience with women and Saeko's candid personality for the sake of a generic lover's pet to keep Saeko in Japan while Ichiban goes away. Pacing? A whole chunk of the first chapter was used preparing for a small date that doesn't have much of a strong repercussion over the game. And a whole invasion into a Yakuza hideout could have been solved with a phone call, meaning that most of the chapter was downright wasted. Cohesion? The gang conveniently forgets that they are pals with one of the biggest information network in Japan and could easily track down Tatara. Sure, a small line hung about how the Gomiju are weakened after the HQ was busted in the previous game is strong, except they pull far worse stunts later in the story. The whole shebang about a YouTube channel destroying the lives of innocent people is thrown to the sidelines and immediately forgotten till the plot remembers it exists right in the middle and then forgets it again. And this is the major plot loop. In order to make the plot work, the characterization of every single major character, Ichiban, his friends and other people from the past series are twisted, except Kiryu, but that's another hairy problem altogether. Then they will make a decision, and a whole chunk of the chapter will be about them faffing around, roaming Hawaii, Japan, but in the end the vast majority of their plans will be rendered pointless because the princess was in another castle, thus making the pacing extremely bloated and scant of story at the same time. And after you fail to make any meaningful progress to not completely stall the plot, someone else will show up, contacting Ichiban and drip feeding him and the player with information, making it feel as if he could have spent the whole game in his hotel room and barely nothing will change. It takes literally more than halfway into the chapters to get the plot to start, and whenever the heroes achieve anything, In order to stall the plot, someone will do something incredibly, forcibly stupid that will result in progress being lost. In order to force the characters to move or to establish a threat, cohesion gets shot as a result. People and organizations are as powerful or weak as the plot demands on a whim. For example, the Gomiju can track a YouTuber because the plot says so, but later they hack into a goddamn foreign satellite to find info about the big bad. You can't just say that an organization is weak and then pull out something like this without destroying the cohesion in the process and making the player stop caring about who is stronger or what. But it happens with everyone, frequently. Hell, the pacing is so problematic that you get Zhao and Jung-gi-han in the last 2 chapters. Who thought this was a good idea? The story itself is also a convoluted mess. First and foremost, it commits the cardinal sin in storytelling of either retconning or downright nullifying all achievements of past games. The central themes are forgiveness and taking responsibility, but they are so scantily thrown within the drip-fed plot that I can understand why a chunk of the players didn't catch on. Not helping matters is several ham-fisted, poorly researched criticisms about other topics such as colonialism or YouTube culture are carelessly thrown around into the mix and promptly forgotten. Thus, coherence is thrown through the window. The new characters are another problem. There are far too many with bloated importance that end up not mattering at all, or whose stories are so badly wrapped up that you wonder why they were even added to the plot in the first place. 4 central villains that come and go with convoluted reasons that also seems to change on a whim for the sake of plot twists. The additions to the cast, Shitose and Tomizawa, are poorly made. Shitose is the rich gal with rich gal's problems, not helping that she nearly kills Kasuga twice, and her flimsy justifications are instantly accepted and forgiven. And Tomizawa is what happens when you take Namba and removes everything charming around him and replace him with cheap drama. He's a cabbie that is wrapped up on Hawaii's underworld and serves as a straight man to Ichiban antics. That by itself would be more than enough, but instead of building him from the ground like they did with Namba in the previous game, whenever he needs relevance, the plot suddenly shows up with depressing and dramatic info about his past over and over and over. Melodrama is the name of the poison, and while not in the center but close to it, lies Kiryu. Luckily, the narrative avoided dumping him down akin to 5 or 6, but the worst vices of the character are here in spades, as in everything turns dramatic to make him shine and enhance drama. People shout the Dragon of Dojima with praise whenever he goes. Badasses are suddenly turned into idiots in order to make Kiryu give them a life lesson and more often than not, beat some sense into them. Seonhee, Jonggi's boss, is made available as a playable character, but she spends nearly every single second of her time fawning over Kiryu. But of course, nothing comes from this because God forbids the status quo being broken and Kiryu finally checking up with a woman. This mess unsurprisingly affects the majority of the side quests as well, making them boring and sometimes even giving dangerous life lessons, like for example how it's okay to give money to scammers because they give you attention, or how an abusive parent that beats the snot out of his kid and steals his lemonade stand money only needs to be beaten up once and have a peppy talk to get back to his senses. In the end, I couldn't be bothered to follow the plot, and by the 4th chapter I couldn't care about the characters and I couldn't even be remotely invested in anything. But it still wasn't as bad as 3 and 5. By some sort of miracle, whenever the game ditches the drama, meaning most of the main story, it suddenly gets fun and good, genuinely good. Infinity Wealth's saving grace is that, unlike 5, people here aren't miserable all the time. Ichiban actually takes time to have fun in Hawaii, and the chapters focused on Kiryu going through his memory lane are actually endearing. The side activities of Dondoko Island and the Sujimon League are, to me, the best kind of parody. They are love letters to the original franchises, but knows that their premises are ridiculous. Kasuga basically goes Animal Crossing and Pokemon respectively, and the premises are played straight with downright hilarious results. resorts. After all, making a resort in a tropical island is okay, but kinda boring. But putting a whorehouse in it to make it sleazy enough that your action movie director will like your island? Hilarious. Everyone and their mother has already poked and prodded that Pokémons are slaves, but here, making grown-ass hobos fight each other and treating it as a children's game? Especially since your starter Pokémon, Sujimon, are the crew of the Sodachi Dojo from 4? In their glorious, pathetic misery? It made me genuinely stop the game to laugh. Sub-stories follow the same formula. The "my childhood friend went bad" melodrama plot is basically used at least 3 times, and I started skipping and stopped counting them altogether. But then, when it touches back into ludicrous comedy, it gets me instantly glued back to the screen. While Ichiban got flanderized, he is still a good and inspiring person at heart, and seeing him try to uplift people is still endearing, and far better than Kiryu being a miserable asshole grouch like in 5. Speaking of the Dragon of Dojima, Kiryu's core more or less remained the same, a good-willed, tough-as-nails stubborn person, so whenever he doesn't need to dip in drama, he is enjoyable to see. So in the end, the worst writing in the series is still a technical tie between 3 and 5. 3 is the god-awful but at the same time hilarious stupid, while 5 is just downright bad, saved by better gameplay mechanics. Therefore, I'd put Infinity Wealth as a technical tie with 6. Song of Life's story was so stupid and twisted that it ended a comedy, even during its most dramatic points. Especially during its dramatic points. But Infinity Wealth's story is simply boring due to how it is a technical mess, but at the same time it offers breaths of fresh air from time to time and the mechanics are absurdly sharper. Soundtrack. Music-wise, there isn't much to say. It's good, but ever since Yakuza cast away the rock in favor of the dubstep, it got overall weaker. There aren't any special powerhouse songs like Receive You from Zero, nor combat tracks with charm and personality like Ryukyu Humming or Crashing Strike, but it's not boring either. Voice acting still quite strong on the Japanese side. By now the Yakuza cast dispenses any sort of comments due to their experience and skill, with 2 specific exceptions. The voice actor of the villain Dwight ended up bland, generic thug, and Bryce, the Hawaiian bilingual character, uses a VA that only knows to speak Japanese. So whenever he opens up his mouth to speak English, it sounds downright awful. On the English voice actor side, however, I heard a lot about it, and after going through this game, I have to say that the problem wasn't the cast per se, but the directing. The lip synchronization is downright ignored during some times, and during several moments voice actors overreact to what's happening on screen, not matching at all the situation at hand. Ichiban's English VA feels as if he tried his best but went a tad overboard, and Tomizawa's VA felt like he was playing a completely different character. About Yongie playing Kiryu, and I feel that the biggest problem isn't Yongie himself, but rather a sad happenstance. Yongie is a YouTube journalist that speaks in a more direct, simplified tone, and Kiryu is a stoic character that speaks in a contained, direct and simplified tone. Because both him and Kiryu use a similar vocalization, it's nearly impossible not to feel like Yongie is playing just himself. It can be done, but it would need an ungodly amount of experience, control and a really good directing. And just like the Japanese VAs, the execution to the rule is that Danny Trejo playing Dwight. It was, unsurprisingly, a downright joy to hear how easily he slips into the character of the big, boisterous gangster like a second skin. I wish there was an option of letting the Japanese characters be voiced by Japanese and the American ones by English speakers. So for the first time ever, we have a Yakuza game where it may be better to switch to English in certain parts. Final thoughts. Wow, this was a tough one to properly process. I know that the hand of the Yakuza franchise is uneven, but I didn't expect how uneven it was. Several stories mistakes are downright newbie in nature, and this is the same studio that made Yakuza 0 and 7. So I cannot properly recommend this game. Maybe, and even then on a sale. For the general public, just avoid this game and watch the cutscenes on YouTube. Now, if you are the kind of gamer that can ignore a story for a good gameplay, or if you are a fan that needs to see how things wrap up, then yes, get this one on a sale. Spoilers. I realized that the writing in this game would be as bad as 6 as soon as Kasuga started falling over Kiryu so much that I genuinely thought that he'd ask to suck his dick. But all he did was to ask him to give him a shoulder massage. But the point I realized that this would be Yakuza 6 levels of ridiculousness and messy writing was when they explained how Kiryu got his cancer. It wasn't enough that Kiryu smoked like a damn coal power plant. It wasn't enough that he drank so much that it would qualify as a car. It wasn't enough that his body was stabbed, shot, beaten up, run by cars and everything else through the years. No. In order to justify the almighty dragon of Dojima from getting cancer, the writers had to pull off some of the most ludicrous ideas out of this fine boyish mind ever. In the last game, we see that Kiryu was being employed by the Daidoji as a heavy hitter, because the Daidoji knows that Kiryu is a monster in melee and nearly unkillable. And for some god knows why reason, they allow Kiryu, the frontliner, to work on a goddamn nuclear waste disposal facility. Sure, working on a hazardous environment is enough to give you cancer over some years, but no, the writing has to go beyond. So suddenly a forklift driver gets a heart attack while carrying some drums of nuclear material, slams into another pile of drums causing a leak. This is already ridiculous because I know how freaking hard it is to make one of those things leak, but it goes beyond. Kiryu needs to save the guy who suffered a heart attack, and one of the drums falls against his back and smashes his mask, so he breathes his toxic gas justifying the cancer. Kiryu tries to say that he went there because he vowed never to see the light of the day to atone for his criminal life, but fans of the series, actually anyone with a goddamn brain, would know that this is bullshit to excuse slopped up writing. In another moment, the Tatara-chan reveals that he knows about Kiryu and reveals it to the world that the Dragon of Dojima is still alive. From a storytelling perspective, this is at the same time ludicrous, stupid, and a good opportunity that was shot down and left to die. Ludicrous because the previous game established that the Daidoji, whom Kiryu served, are a behemoth in the older world. But no one's tried any sort of informational or damage control. Stupid because it relies on the gigantic contrivance of the film crew being at the right time at the right place. The game tries to justify this by being a guy with a phone, but he wouldn't be able to hear jack without a directional professional microphone. And an opportunity to make Kiryu let loose and go hug his friends and family. After all, the secret is already out. But after this, for some incredibly dumb reason, nothing changes. They keep the status quo intact. No one talks to the kids of the orphanage that their uncle is still alive. No one in the underworld, who should be turned to the sort of thing, learns that Kiryu is alive. And Kiryu himself just goes stubbornly going, "Oh, but the Daidoji may do something if I approach my family, and thus I will pretend to be dead." Instead of, talking with his superiors, so nothing changes and this amazing opportunity is shot. But it actually gets worse. Many people from Kiryu's old life cannot or will not move on from their desire to meet him, especially Kaoru Sayama from Yakuza 2, who feels like one of the reasons she can't settle down is that she feels she's still waiting for Kiryu to return. It's like the writer's idolization of Kiryu is turning the writer damaging to other characters. They just won't let them just move on, but they won't let them meet Kiryu and thus fulfill their wishes either. So surprised, the wheelchair-bound guy was evil all along. And he wasn't wheelchair-bound either. He spent days in a safe house with the Daidoji without anyone actually bothering to check who the hell is he. Especially since he used his real name, or checking what the fuck he was doing. And when he's discovered, everyone just stands around while he gloats about duping everyone. Nobody moves. Nobody tries to run away. Nobody tries to fill the evil cripple with lead. This plot only moves on due to everyone acting like goddamn morons. I gotta say, Ichiban not letting Bryce have his last laugh and kill himself was actually quite good. I have no shame in admitting this. The ending wasn't a total loss, but it was still awful. It barely explains what happened to everyone involved, then shows Haruka finally going to the hospital to meet Kiryu with her son, Haruto, only to not find him in bed. And instead of, asking a nurse where the hell Kiryu is like any sunny person, she just says that when he is ready, he will meet them. And then it cuts to Kiryu making a radiotherapy session against his cancer and using his real name. On one hand, Kiryu shows that he got his name back, and on the other, the powers that be forced the status quo into unbelievably stupid levels. You're telling me that Haruka, in her first visit to the hospital, nobody told her that Kiryu was in a radiotherapy session, she just sees his empty bed and leaves, and they call this an ending. This is still not as bad as 5's ending, but what the f. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and see you all next time. If you liked this video, please press the shiny button, and if you want to hear more, subscribe.